Alright, buckle up history fans. Welcome to the deep dive. We're about to march into some serious military history today. Ready, go. Oh, yes. Awesome. So today we're focusing on ancient Rome. But not the Rome of emperors and gladiators. Yeah, we're going way back to the Republic. Yeah, to a time when Rome was still fighting for its survival right before they were this massive empire. They were a scrappy little city-state with some seriously ambitious neighbors. And a lot of people don't realize just how violent Rome's rise to power actually was. I mean, their early history, it's full of wars and conquests. Definitely wasn't all togas and philosophy, was it? Not by a long shot. Their success, like that of a lot of empires, was built on some pretty brutal conflicts. So where to even begin with all this? I mean, Rome's early history is a bit of a tangled mess, isn't it? Yeah. It is, but I think the Veii War is a good place to start. It really shows you how determined the Romans were, even back then. Okay, the Veii War. Yeah, so we're talking about the conflict with the Etruscans, right? Exactly. The Etruscans were a powerful force in Italy at the time, and they controlled Veii, which was this major city right on Rome's doorstep. Basically, a rival superpower just a stone's throw away. Talk about an awkward neighbor. And this war, it lasted for what, like 10 years? That's 10 years of siege warfare. It was a brutal, drawn-out conflict, and it really tested the Romans. 10 years, wow. So how did it finally end? I'm guessing the Romans won, but yeah, they did. But it was a hard-fought victory, and it showed just how far they were willing to go to achieve their goals. I mean, they completely destroyed Veii, razed it to the ground. It was a statement. Well, That's pretty hardcore. Yeah, so the Veii War was a turning point then. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It marked the beginning of Rome's expansion, the start of their path to becoming this dominant power in Italy. But that dominance, it wasn't always a sure thing, was it? I mean, our sources mention the Gallic invasion of 390 BC, and that sounds like a major setback for the Romans. Yeah, the Gallic invasion was a real shock. They sacked Rome, literally burned the city. It was a humiliating defeat, and it showed that the Romans weren't invincible. And what's interesting is that the Gauls, they were actually more technologically advanced in some ways, weren't they? Absolutely. They had things like saddles with four corners, almost like ancient shock absorbers. Their weapons and tactics were sometimes superior to what the Romans were using. So how did the Romans respond? Well, they learned from their defeat. That's one of the things that made them so successful. They adapted, they incorporated some of those Gallic innovations into their own army. Smart move. So even defeat, they found a way to come back stronger. It's like that saying, what doesn't kill you? Right. And that adaptability, it really came into play during the next major conflict they faced, the Samnite Wars. Oh yeah, the Samnite Wars, this is another long one, right? Like decades of fighting. Decades, imagine that. 50 years of brutal back-and-forth warfare. The Samnites were tough, skilled warriors, and they gave the Romans a real run for their money. So this was more than just a few battles. It was like a whole generation of Romans growing up fighting the Samnites. That's a good way to put it. It was a crucible. It forged the Roman legions into the fighting force they became known for. And there were some pretty intense moments during those wars, right? Our source mentions a story of Consul Decius sacrificing himself in battle. Like something out of a movie. It's a pretty powerful story. It shows the kind of leadership and dedication that was expected of Roman commanders. And these wars, they had a major impact on Rome's military doctrine. Wow, they had to adapt their tactics and strategy to fight the Samnite. Oh, yeah. The legions emerged from these conflicts as a much more disciplined, organized force. They learned how to fight in difficult terrain. They developed new formations. It was a whole evolution of their military thinking. So in a way, the Samnites were helping to create the very army that would eventually conquer them. Ironically, yes. And that's a pattern we see throughout Roman history. They learned from their enemies, even in defeat. They adapted, they evolved, and they came back stronger. It's part of what made them so successful. Okay, so we've got the Veii War, the Gallic invasion, the Samnite Wars. It seems like early Rome was constantly being tested in the fires of war. Absolutely. And these conflicts, they shaped the Roman military, and in turn, they shaped the course of history. It's incredible, really, when you think about it. Absolutely. And speaking of incredible, up next we're going to talk about one of the most fascinating figures in military history, Pyrrhus of Epirus, the little Alexander. And get this, he brought war elephants to Italy. Can you imagine elephants? Oh, this is kind of big. I know, right? So stick around, everyone. Things are about to get really interesting. So Pyrrhus of Epirus. Now, this guy was like a real-life action hero, a brilliant general, a skilled warrior, and he even brought war elephants with him. Yeah, the elephants. It's like something out of a movie, right? But seriously, who was this Pyrrhus guy? What made him so special? Well, he was the king of Epirus, a region in ancient Greece, and he was a descendant of Achilles, so already, he's got this legendary lineage. Okay, so good genes. But what about his military skills? I mean, our sources call him the Little Alexander. That's a pretty big comparison. Oh yeah, he definitely earned that nickname. He was a brilliant tactician, he'd studied Alexander the Great's campaigns, and he dreamed of building his own empire. So he saw Italy as his chance to kind of make a name for himself, right? Yeah, pretty much. He saw an opportunity to carve out his own slice of the Roman world, and for a while, it really looked like he might pull it off. I mean, the Romans had never faced anything like his army before. Wow, those war elephants must have been terrifying. Well, absolutely. I mean, imagine you're a Roman soldier and you see these massive elephants charging at you. It would have been pure chaos. Yeah, total panic. Yeah. So how did the Romans fare against this elephant-powered army? Well, it was a tough fight. The Battle of Heraclea in 280 BC with a real turning point. Pyrrhus won, but it was a costly victory. Right, wasn't that the battle where he said something like, another victory like this and we're doomed? Something about Pyrrhic victories. Exactly, it's become his famous saying, a Pyrrhic victory is one that comes at such a high cost that it's basically a defeat in disguise. Ouch. So, even when he won, he was losing. I guess that's why you eventually had to pull out of Italy. But he didn't just disappear, did he? I mean, what happened to Pyrrhus after all this? Well, like you said, he was ambitious, he still wanted to conquer new lands, and it seems like he just couldn't resist a good fight. So he got involved in a conflict in Sicily. Wait, wasn't that where the Romans were eventually going to clash with Carthage? Exactly, but this was a little earlier. Syracuse, a Greek city in Sicily, was fighting against Carthage, and they called on Pyrrhus for help. So he's like the ancient world's 911 call, the guy you call when you need a warrior king with elephants. Pretty much. And Pyrrhus, well, he saw an opportunity to add Sicily to his growing list of conquests. But didn't things go so well for him in Sicily, right? What happened there? He had some initial success, but ultimately he was forced to retreat. He just couldn't overcome the combined forces of Carthage and the Sicilian cities that opposed him. So another Pyrrhic victory, maybe? A lot of fighting, not a lot to show for it. You could say that. But his campaigns in Italy and Sicily, they had a lasting impact. They showed that Rome wasn't invincible, and they helped to set the stage for the epic clash that was to come, the Punic Wars between Rome and Carthage. Yes, the Punic Wars. That's where things really heat up. But before we get to that, let's take a quick step back. For our listeners who might be thinking, why should I care about all these ancient bastards? What's the significance of all this? Well, it's not just about memorizing dates and names. It's about understanding how these early conflicts shaped the world we live in. I mean, the decisions made, the battles fought, the empires that rose and fell during this period, they had a profound impact on the development of Western civilization. So studying these wars is like a window into the past. It helps us understand how we got to where we are today. Exactly. And it also reminds us that history is full of surprises. I mean, who would have thought that a king from Greece with war elephants would almost conquer Rome? It just goes to show you that anything is possible, and that's what makes history so fascinating, right? Absolutely. All right, so back to Rome and Carthage. They're both rising powers, vying for control of the Mediterranean. And now they're about to go head-to-head in the Punic Wars. Get ready for some epic naval battles, daring strategies, and some of the most intense sieges in ancient history. This is where things get really interesting. Okay, so last time we left off with Rome and Carthage on the brink of war. This is where things get really epic, right? We're talking Punic War. Definitely a clash of titans. It's definitely a clash of titans. And it all kicks off with this, unbelievable move by the Romans. I mean, they were a land power, right? Their strength was in the legions. Right, they were known for their armies, not their navies, exactly. But they knew they couldn't beat Carthage without challenging them at sea. So they did something totally audacious. They built a fleet from scratch. Wait, hold on. From scratch? Like, they didn't have any ships before this. Basically, yeah. I mean, they had a few, but nothing on the scale of the Carthaginian navy. So they had to learn shipbuilding, train sailors, the whole 9 yards. Wow, talk about a crash course in naval warfare. But how do they even do that? I mean, building a fleet isn't exactly something you can do overnight. They studied, captured Carthaginian ships, reverse engineered the technology, they adapted their land-based tactics for naval combat, and they even invented a new weapon, the corvus. The corvus, what's that? It was this boarding bridge. It let them grapple onto enemy ships and basically turn a sea battle into a land battle. Pretty ingenious, right? Yeah. So they're bringing their strength, land warfare to the sea. It's brilliant. But did it actually work? I mean, the Carthaginians were experienced sailors, right? It wasn't easy. They had some early setbacks, and sure. But the Romans, they learned from their mistakes. They refined their tactics, improved their ships, and eventually those victories started coming. Okay, so they're learning as they go, adapting and overcoming. It's becoming a bit of a Roman theme, isn't it? It definitely is. It's part of what made them so successful. They weren't afraid to experiment, to change things up when things weren't working. So what were some of the key battles in this first Punic War? Anything that really stands out? Well, the Battle of Mylae in 260 BC was a big one. It was the first major Roman naval victory, and it showed that their gamble on building a fleet had actually paid off. So they're turning the tide now. But I'm guessing this wasn't a quick war. No, not at all. It lasted for over 20 years, and there were some brutal sieges. Lilybaeum in Sicily was a real meat-grinder. Both sides just threw everything they had at it. It's amazing how determined they were, both the Romans and the Carthaginians. This wasn't just about winning a few battles, it was about total victory. It's about survival. And ultimately, after 2 decades of conflict, Rome emerged victorious. So Rome wins the first Punic War. What happens next? I mean, it is just the beginning of their rivalry with Carthage, right? It is. And the consequences of this victory are huge. Rome's no longer just a regional power. They've secured control of Sicily, expanded their empire, and they've proven that they can adapt to any challenge, even mastering naval warfare. It's a real turning point for Rome. And for the Mediterranean world, too. Absolutely, and it's a testament to the resilience, the adaptability, and frankly, the ruthlessness of the Roman military machine. They learned from their defeats, they innovated, and they never gave up. It's a story of the ambition, of conflict, of incredible feats of military engineering. And ultimately, it's a story about how those early Roman conquests shaped not just their own destiny, but the course of European history. And it all started with those early struggles against the Etruscans, the Gauls, the Samnites. They were the crucible in which the Roman war machine was forged, they'll said. So for all you military history buffs out there, remember, these aren't just dusty tales from the past. These are the stories that shaped the world we live in. Yeah, and that's what makes them so fascinating, Ray. Until next time, keep exploring.